And we now take leaders' questions. Deputy MacDonald.
Can I extend Kate Mina Fáilte to the students, the pupils of Closh the Owen from Buncrana, from the women from the Briefy Walking Group in Castlebar. Hello, you're all very welcome. Taoiseach, at 10 o'clock this morning, Cara Darmody, a 14-year-old disability campaigner, began a 50-hour protest outside the Dáil, and Cara Darmody joins us in the gallery as well. A very warm welcome to you and to your father, Mark. Cara is an exceptional, an amazing young woman who stepped forward to fight not just for her brothers Neil and John, but for all of the children so badly failed by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael governments. And at the heart of Cara's protest is one simple demand: that the government comply with the law and ensure that no child is left behind. Children with disabilities are legally entitled to an assessment of needs within 6 months, and yet 15,296 children are left well beyond this timeframe, some for years, delaying their access to vital therapies and appropriate school places. And the HSE anticipates that this dire situation will get worse. By the end of 2025, there could be almost 25,000 on waiting lists for assessment of needs. And I've been contacted by so many parents over the last week, and they all have the same story. One mother got a letter on Friday to acknowledge her application for assessment of needs and was informed that the waiting list is in excess of 3 years. Another told me her son is on the list for an appointment which has been cancelled over and over again. Another, whose daughter got a letter saying that it will be between 24 and 33 months before she will be seen, and this child is already on the list for over a year. I work with parents every day in my own constituency. In the North Inner City, the waiting list would make your eyes water, and it's even worse in Cabra. And even then, when you get your assessment of needs, the fight continues, the fight for therapies, for school place, for very basic services. Taoiseach, you have broken the law over and again. There is a legal requirement on you to provide an assessment of needs within 6 months, and you have broken that over and over again. Children are being failed dramatically, left in limbo, while they wait for the supports to which they are entitled. How is it that children are so badly failed? Why is it that people with disabilities are so badly failed? And there's no indication from your government that you are serious at all about complying with the law. So today, the combined opposition come together and demand that government comply with the law. Our motion tonight lays out the clear, concrete steps needed if you are serious about tackling assessment of needs waiting lists and complying with your legal and your moral obligations. A hishi, tá an dlí briste agat, a ríis is a ríis eile. Tá tep suntasach á dhéanamh ar leanaí faoi muí cumas atá fágtha idir dá ceann na má ag fannacht ar maisniú an riachtanas a bhfuil siad I dédal. Inniu, tháinig an phréasúra go léir le chéile chun éirí ar an rialtas clí leis an dlí. So Taoiseach, can you tell parents clearly what is the target date by which you will comply with the law? Can you set out the emergency action you will take and the resources you will make available to Cara's fund to clear the current backlog? And what about workforce planning, Taoiseach? Because in some parts of the state, 60% of positions within the CDNTs are currently vacant.
Thank you, Deputy MacDonald. Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, could I say at the outset that I appreciate the work that Cara Darmody has been doing and her campaigning work with her father Mark, and she's been campaigning for quite some time, and she began initially in terms of advocacy for her family and now nationally in respect of disability rights more generally. And could I say at the outset that when I was appointed Taoiseach earlier in the year, I committed that this would be a government that would step change comprehensively across all areas of government provision for people with special needs or with disabilities, and particularly to focus on young people. Disability is represented at the Cabinet table by a full minister, and I've established, in the process of establishing the first ever disability unit within the Department of An Taoiseach to troubleshoot and to coordinate across all government departments the provision of services for people with disabilities. And if you go through all of the various areas, first of all, the need is increasing all of the time. The 2022 census is indicative of that in terms of the increase in the numbers of people identifying with a special need. And fundamentally in education there has been an exponential increase in investment, huge increase in resources in terms of special needs assistance at about 23,400 now. We have 20,800 special education teachers, and that's SNAs alone is about $1 billion a year, and that's the way it should be. Special class enrolment has doubled in 5 years, with nearly 19,000 students supported in 3,335 classes, and over 2,700 new placements are planned for 25-26. A new national therapy service in education, beginning in specialist schools, has been agreed by Cabinet, has been decided upon, and work is underway in terms of getting that in place, partially in this school year, in the next school year, 25-26, and fully thereafter. And in terms of more general, then in terms of the NCSE, again, 39 new posts were approved in terms of therapists for the National Council for Special Education, and that recruitment is well underway and has been quite successful and effective. In terms of income supports, the Minister for Social Protection is working in terms of specific budget provisions for children in particular and people more generally with disabilities. On transport, we have specifically asked the Minister for Transport to work on the mobility issues, the disabled tax scheme, working with the Department of Finance to put that back on a proper footing and a better footing than would have been the case beforehand. In relation to the assessment of need, quite fundamentally, we need to change the legislation. The High Court Act, or High Court decision, necessitates, in my view, a change in legislation to ensure that therapists are directed and streamlined to provide services to children more quickly than currently is the case. We have a finite number of therapists currently in the country. The real objective has to be to use those therapists optimally in providing services to children. And I say that very clearly because I'm looking for solutions here. And I think that is one nettle we have to grasp. And it will be challenging, but it's one that we have at the Cabinet. We set up a Cabinet subcommittee on disability, as you know, and it has asked the Minister for Children, the Department of Children, to come back with legislative proposals in respect of the assessment of need area. Recruit and retain therapists, very important. Mutual recognition of qualifications across Europe and with the United Kingdom to enable us to bring more therapists in from overseas, in addition to those that we will be producing through our colleges, and more therapists. So tá gach éon iarracht a dhéanamh an rialtais chun daileáil leis an aib seo. Agus tá annach chudáisne ann, ach an rud is táchtaí bhfuil gá ann an chóras a athrú agus a athrú good topic.
So what the High Court found is that the state is breaking the law. And what the High Court demanded is that the state be in compliance with the law. That's what the ruling means. It does not mean change the law. So what your message to us today, Taoiseach, is that rather than working to be in compliance with the law, to ensure that children get the assessment of needs to which they are legally entitled within the statutory framework of 6 months, rather than working for compliance, your idea is to change the law and to remove that provision. I think there would be a common view, certainly across those that work within the disabilities and families, that actually the problem isn't the law. Actually, it's very good law. It's a very good idea that a rigorous and thorough assessment of needs is given to every child and person who needs it within a 6 months time frame. The issue here is government inaction. The issue here is government failure. So, Taoiseach, I want to put it to you again. rather than suggesting that you simply change the law, comply with the law and tell us how you are going to make it possible that those 15,000 children who wait and wait and wait will get their assessment of needs and consequently the services and supports to which they are entitled.
Deputy, you have offered no solution. You have offered rhetoric, and that's all. No, the bottom line is this. We will do everything we simply can to deal with the existing waiting lists and so forth. And there's been a significant increase in terms of the numbers of assessments that have actually taken place, a 30% increase on 2023. But that in itself will not deal with the current situation. And so you have to have a multifaceted response. We need more therapists in third-level colleges. We will be providing more private funding to procure assessments. But all that will not, in my view, redirect the work of therapists most appropriately, which is to provide services to children. And I'll just make the point, I'm making the point, under the current system, the status quo is simply not tenable, Deputy. You must know that deep down. So there has to be a change in respect of that, and there also has to be, in my view, every single avenue that we can to increase the number of therapists, to recruit more therapists, because the money is there in many instances. HSE have not been able to recruit 100% to their CDNT teams.
Deputy Ivana Bacik.
Well, Taoiseach, today, as you know, as we all know, marks the beginning of the 50-hour protest by young Cara Darmody, and I, like others, want to welcome Cara and her father Mark to the gallery. Cara is an incredible campaigner for the rights of children with additional needs, and she's only 14 years old. Taoiseach, she's staging this protest, as you know, to raise awareness of what is an emergency, your government's failure to comply with the Disability Act. And I think of all that you said just now in response, that point you made, the status quo is not tenable. Of course the status quo is not tenable. It's not tenable for children like Cara's brothers. It's not tenable for the many thousands of children, 15,000 children nationally, who are now languishing on waiting lists, awaiting an assessment of needs. And in breach of your government's own law, when the HSE receives an application, Taoiseach, it's set out in law that the assessment of need must be carried out within 6 months. My colleague, Deputy Alan Kelly, has received responses to parliamentary questions which reveal that in the first quarter of this year, that legally binding 6-month deadline was missed in a shocking 93% of cases. 93% is an extraordinarily high rate of failure, Taoiseach. It's a desperate embarrassment. And it's an ongoing problem that you've inherited from your own outgoing government, the previous government. And there can be no passing of the buck. You said there would be a step change. You used that language again just now. That's not what we have seen. Taoiseach, it's 2 years to the week, this week, that we in Labour brought a Dáil motion, again with the great support and encouragement of Cara Darmody, setting out a plan, a constructive plan to take on and address these waiting lists and to treat the chronic delay in diagnoses like the national emergency it is. And on that day, many of us will recall that in this House, then Minister of State Anne Rabbitte made a powerful speech, acknowledging responsibility for failure and acknowledging also profound impact upon children and families. And Anne Rabbitte made a commitment that if capacity did not improve, she would adopt our Labour proposal to reimburse parents for the price of private assessments as an emergency and constructive way of addressing this appalling shortfall. Taoiseach, I think we all took that significant announcement as a sign that you and your government would place a greater focus on resolving this. But the stories and accounts we're hearing from parents and families across the country and the waiting list figures really say otherwise. We understand you won't oppose tonight's cross-party motion, and that's welcome, but non-opposition is not enough, because you didn't oppose our Labour motion 2 years ago on this very topic. You made all the right noises then, but the problem has got worse since then. Deputy Kelly's PQ responses show that in the first quarter of this year, just 1,412 assessments were carried out. A tiny number, a fraction of the need, when we see more than 15,000 children overdue an assessment, a number expected to grow to 25,000 by the end of this year. So, Taoiseach, I am asking you, as Cara asks, when will you treat this as the national emergency it is? When will we see those waiting lists properly and effectively addressed?
To respond.
It's very clear, Deputy, and you know that one of the reasons why very, very quickly in this government we established the need for a national school or therapy in school service, which we have now commenced and taken a decision to do, was because of the inadequacy of the response within the health service itself. The challenges that many CDNT teams are experiencing in recruitment and in retaining therapists, and wider general issues, because the issue is not one of resources actually, the issue is one of capacity. And private funding has been provided last year, and quite a number of private therapists have been procured. But in my view, the standing operating procedure model that the HSE adopted was struck down by the courts. And the rationale behind it was to prioritise establishing the needs of children rather than providing the diagnosis immediately. Why? To ensure a quicker route to intervention services. It's estimated at the moment that up to 30%, this is what I've been informed by the HSE, 30% of assessments, up to 30% have been identified as not having a disability. So it's about how do we allocate the resources more effectively and in a targeted way to the children that require those services as quickly as possible. That is the objective that we have to focus in on. What will enable us to do that in the short term more effectively than currently is the case? Because up to 90 hours at the moment, between 37 and 90 hours could be the period of time frame for an assessment indeed at the moment. There's finite capacity in terms of therapists out there, whether they're in the private sector or in the public sector. Yes, we have to create more third-level places, which we did and we're going to do more of. I think we have to facilitate more recruitment of therapists from overseas, and I think CORE and the regulatory body needs to be flexible in that regard. And that's a general problem with mutual recognition of qualifications, because we do need to supplement our own development of graduates through our third-level system with graduates from overseas to get a higher number in assessing and, crucially, providing services to children. In education, you can see a line of sight in terms of when we, allocating the resources and so on, getting visibility over the provision of services. We're not quite there yet, and I've acknowledged in Dublin we've issues with some school places. And I won't be happy until 100% of children are looked after in terms of a school place for September. But there's an issue with therapists, and there has been. And that's why we've moved to an education model in terms of special schools and to commence with that, and then to expand beyond that, and then to support the community teams as well. But in the short term, there are choices that we can take to enable therapists to get to children more quickly and to be used more optimally than currently is the case for children. That is the case I am making in terms of why I think we need legislative change, along with a range of other measures also. Not to take away rights, but to provide services to children.
Deputy Bacik.
Well, Taoiseach, I listened carefully when you said the issue is not one of resources but one of capacity, and then you threw out a number of hypothetical ways in which capacity could be addressed. But your government hasn't done anything to address capacity. I sat yesterday with two desperate mothers in my own constituency, desperate to get school places for their children. And you've said about school places, again, this is shameful, the failure of government on school places for children with additional needs. You know what the two mothers said to me? They said, why doesn't the government upskill us? Why don't we use the resource of all those parents who have fought so hard for so long and had to struggle so hard to get places, to get therapies, to get assessments of need in the first place for their children? Let's look at upskilling, a programme of upskilling, and that's what they're telling me. Otherwise, Taoiseach, your government will continue to fail. I'm looking at the letter Deputy Kelly got. 7% of assessments of need carried out within the time frame. 93% failure rate. That is shocking. And I'm asking Taoiseach, will you meet Cara Darmody today? Will you hear from her the constructive proposals that she has?
Thank you, Deputy.
Based on her own lived experience in her own family, will you hear from her what your government can constructively do to address that capacity shortfall?
Taoiseach.
Say, Deputy, in terms of, you mentioned special education there. Special class enrolment has doubled. Doubled in 5 years. So we've gone from about 9,000 to 19,000. Now, what is that saying? It's revealing the exponential growth in the number of children requiring special needs provision and services. And resources has expanded accordingly in terms of both the number of classes, SNAs, special teachers, and funding for extra classrooms and so on in the special needs area. So if you just, any objective person assessing what has been happening in special education, while not saying we're there yet, would have to acknowledge the very significant growth and expansion, rightly so, I'm absolutely committed to this, and I want to get this sorted. But that will mean taking decisions, which I anticipate will run into opposition here, as is the nature of politics. That's fair enough.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And sorry, I've already organised and arranged.
Thank you,
I think there's been engagement, and we will meet.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Cian O'Callaghan of the Social Democrats. Deputy Cian O'Callaghan.
Successive governments have let children with autism and intellectual disabilities down in the worst possible way. Permanent damage is being caused to thousands and thousands of children. The fact that this is happening is a national disgrace. Those are not my words, Taoiseach. They are the words of 14-year-old Karma Darmody, who joins us in the gallery, who's begun a 50-hour protest over disability services outside the Dáil. But Cara didn't utter those words today, Taoiseach. They were spoken last year when Cara held a weekly protest outside Leinster House and government buildings. Taoiseach, Cara has been highlighting the crisis in assessment of need and disability services since she was just 11. No child should have to spend years campaigning and protesting for basic services. Cara should be in school today, like other kids her age, but she isn't. She's here in the gallery and outside the building during the day to highlight that services are getting worse, not better. She has watched her two younger brothers, Neil and John, who have additional needs, being repeatedly failed. And she's made it very clear that she's undertaking her protest for every child in the country that has been left behind. Taoiseach, there are now more than 15,000 children all over the country who are overdue an assessment of need. The HSE is warning that by the end of the year, this figure could be 25,000. That will be 25,000 children left waiting for an assessment of need beyond the legal time limit, 25,000 children with additional needs being failed by this government, 25,000 children just like Neil and John. This is utterly unacceptable, Taoiseach. When you're asked about this, you blame court judgments, you blame the law, and you blame growing need. You fail to take responsibility. Taoiseach, families have had enough of government excuses. Opposition parties are putting down a joint motion this evening calling for immediate action. Children with additional needs deserve more than just broken promises. They need quality services to be available when they need them. We all know that childhood is fleeting, and at the moment too many children are being left behind. Consistent government failures mean that children are being denied the opportunity to reach their full potential. We can't and we won't tolerate that. Taoiseach, the Dáil motion that the Social Democrats and other parties have tabled isn't asking for bells and whistles, it's asking for the government to comply with the law. It should not take a 50-hour protest outside the Dáil by Cara, just 14 years of age, to shame this government into action, to provide assessments of need within the legal time limit of 6 months. So, Taoiseach, are you going to stop breaking this law?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Just to say at the outset, Deputy, that the government from day one has identified the entire area of disability and special needs as a key priority of government, along with housing and as I said earlier, along with child poverty. And that will be reflected in the forthcoming budget, but has already been reflected in government initiatives. Or recent meetings in terms of the Cabinet Subcommittee have taken decisions in respect of this. And if you go back along, and your party would have been in government at the time, the whole CDNT, Progressing Disability Initiative, was taken. I'm not blaming anyone, but I think that did not work. And I said it at the time it wouldn't work, and I've been saying it consistently. And that is why a new national school therapy service is being established, quite frankly. The CDNT teams have had huge difficulty in recruiting a sufficiency of therapists. There's a 21% vacancy rate in CDNT teams across the country. That model has not worked for a variety of reasons. I'm not blaming High Court decisions, but the standing operating procedures that the HSE was proving to be effective and impactful for many, many children, because it was getting therapy services to children more quickly. And without removing any rights, I do believe the legislation needs to be changed. Because to be fair to the courts ruled, it's then up to the legislator to deal with that ruling in terms of either amending the Act and so on. Because given the finite number of therapists we have, we can pass all the motions we like, but we have to deal in a very pragmatic solution-based approach right now. We do have to deal with this in a multifaceted way, but right now we need to make sure that the therapists we have are focused on providing services to children as quickly as we possibly can, consistent with the needs of those children. We've made a lot of progress in education. We want to make more progress on mobility and transport. We have made progress on increasing various payments, but we want to do a lot more in terms of income-related supports for our children and for families with disability within the family. And right across the board, we want to make really good quality improvements for people with disabilities. And we are determined to do that and to build on progress that has been made in most areas, bar the health area. I would acknowledge that the issue of providing therapists to children has not worked at all. And I'm absolutely determined that this government will do everything in its power to deal with this issue. At the moment, as interim measures, we are providing finance and funding in terms of procuring private capacity. But again, very often, it's within the overall framework of finite capacity. There's only so many therapists in the country at any one given time.
See, Taoiseach, you talk about progress, you talk about step change, but the HSE is saying that the shocking figure of more than 15,000 children overdue an assessment of need this year is going to be 25,000 children by the end of this year. That's what's happening. And you know that early intervention is absolutely crucial for children, makes the world of difference. It can mean the difference between a child learning with the proper supports to be able to talk, to be able to participate, to be able to make friends, or when they don't get that, getting left behind and left out. Makes all the difference. So where is, Taoiseach, the emergency action that you're planning to address this? What is it that you're going to do today to start fixing this? And finally, will you actually start, as Cara is asking, will you start complying with the law, and when are you going to comply with the law?
Sure. Could I first of all say early intervention is the key. Couldn't agree more. And we do need to expand early childcare services for our children with additional needs, and we need to, in particular, also early childhood education provision for children with additional needs. And we are doing that, and we will continue to expand services there. The HSE is not in a position to fulfil the law right now. You know that, and I know that. So, and we have to respond to enable us to get therapy services to children as effectively, optimally as we can. And that is our agenda, to use the resources we have for children who need services. That's both existing resources, how we add to those resources through recruitment and retention, and increasing the number of therapy places within our third-level colleges, to work on therapy assistance, more greater provision there also. But we have to, as a society, work smarter in terms of utilising the resources that are there right now in terms of therapists for the benefit of children.
We now move to the Independent Parties Technical Group. Deputy Brian Stanley.
Thanks, Senator. Just inform us all that they tend to continue
there
to break the
There is no
law
point of
on
order
this issue.
at this stage. Sorry,
I think it's really
Deputy Brian
I've never heard a
Stanley.
government in all my time declare that they intend to continue to break the law.
Deputy, please. Deputy Brian Stanley.
Thank you, Concordia. And I want to also welcome Cara and Mark to the public gallery today, and I will be speaking on that issue later on in the day. It's a scandal that you have to be here again, Cara, to protest on this issue. The issue I want to raise with you, Taoiseach, is primary care, or the absence of primary care. It's over 8 years since Launch Care plan was agreed for a public health system by all parties in this House at the time. And it's due to be fully up and running by the end of this year, by the 31st of December. But of course, we're so far away from the full implementation of its recommendations and of what was set out in that plan. And nowhere is this more starkly seen than in the area of primary care. The sparse nature of it right throughout the state, and particularly in County Laois. And despite the best efforts of those GPs and staff working in the sector across the state. We're not within a country mile of having a properly resourced and fully functioning primary care system. The effects of that are many: lack of timely intervention, where minor health issues become chronic cases and finish up in hospitals. We have emergency departments who are clogged up with people who can't afford to go to a GP because they don't have a medical card, or in some cases they cannot even get a GP, even when they have a medical card or even when they're going privately. I have people that come to me on occasions, and even when they're paying privately, they can't access a GP. And treatments that should be available in primary care centres and in local health centres are just simply not there. So it's off to the hospital. That's where people are going. So the basics are that we have to have health centres and GPs to staff them, and the ancillary staff, which we don't have in this country, to manage them, to man them, and to make sure that the service is there. And in County Laois, we're short on both counts of the basics. We have no primary care centre in Portlaoise, a town with a population which is exceeding the city of Kilkenny. It's a population now in the region of 30,000. We've health centres in Mountrath and Borrisnostre, Rathdowney, Grey Cullen that need either replacement or upgrade. In the case of Portlaoise, the design is done, but it requires capital funding to move it on. It's on a perfect site located. Mountrath, the site that the centre of the stair is too small, it's outdated, it's been talked about, but it needs to be moved on. Rathdowney is the same, totally unsuitable, and that needs to be progressed to put in place a new centre. But we're moving at snail's pace, Taoiseach. Borrisnostre needs replacement, and there's an opportunity there now to locate it within the new courthouse, within the old courthouse that's been refurbished by the County Council. Grey Cullen, the same. There's talks about making the health centre for the south-east corner of Laois, taking into Swan and Newtown, Crettyard, Collection and Arles. But this can't happen because as things stand, they can't even cater for the population of Grey Cullen. So will you start resourcing primary care in County Laois and other counties?
First of all, I thank the Deputy very much for raising the issue of the crucial importance of primary care provision. Indeed, when I was Minister for Health, we made primary care a cornerstone of the then health strategy at the time in 2001, Quality and Fairness. It took some time, but I think in the modern era we have progressed fairly significantly in terms of the provision of primary care centres. There are now about 179 primary care centres across the country, and 50 of those have been opened since 2020. And overall, the government is delivering record levels of investment in health services. A record 25 billion in 2025, and that represents an increase in health funding since 2019 of over 70%. It also, in parallel with primary care, supports very important initiatives like enhanced community care and in terms of oral health, palliative care and obviously cardiovascular and cancer care. And sometimes people say, health absorbs an awful lot of expenditure, and are we pouring all the money into an empty sort of black hole? We're not actually. Outcomes are improving all of the time, and that needs to be acknowledged as well. Life expectancy is now above 82. We're in a small group of 7 EU member states where that is the case. Our mortality rate fell by 11% over the decade to 14 to 222. Mortality rate for all circulatory system diseases fell by 20% in that period, with heart disease and stroke falling by 28% and 37% respectively. And a lot of that was due to the work in primary care in terms of cardiac initiatives in particular. Mortality rate for all cancers dropped by 15%, with cancer of the trachea, bronchus and lung and breast cancer dropping by 21% and 22% respectively. And mortality rate for all respiratory system diseases has fallen by 15%, with pneumonia, with chronic lower respiratory diseases and pneumonia falling by 9% and 41% respectively. Now I say all of that, we are making progress in terms of investment in health and critically in terms of health outcomes. There are other aspects of that, healthy lifestyles and nutrition and so on. But primary care is central to it. And we will, in terms of chronic disease, for example, chronic disease management, primary care is where it's at. and 95% of GPs are now signed up to the chronic disease management programme, and over 645,000 patient reviews by GPs in 2024 alone, and 92% of patients with chronic disease are now fully managed routinely in primary care and not attending hospital for managing their condition. Now, I'd say by what you have said, progress is happening in your constituency. I think Portlaoise, you said the design stage is complete for the primary care centre, and you said it's an excellent site. So I would anticipate progress in that regard. I will check with the Minister and with the HSE in respect to the capital requirements for that, but I hear you loud and clear, and it is an important centre of population that does require a primary care centre.
Thanks, Taoiseach, for your reply. But also we need GPs. And Mike Colleton of the Irish College of General Practitioners, he said that we clearly have a deficit in our GP numbers, and he listed out a number of counties, including Laois and that. And the last time I checked, we were way below what's required. Primary care centres in other countries and health centres include a whole range of services, Taoiseach: physiotherapy, occupational therapy, dental, chiropody, mental health services, etc. But we're miles away from that comprehensive primary care model. We neither have the staff nor the facilities. I agree with you that primary care is the cornerstone. So will your government commit to, and you said 79 have been funded, primary care centres, so will your government commit to the capital funding needed to construct a new primary care centre in Portlaoise? The site is there, the design is there, and new health centres for Mountrat and Rathdowney, and upgrades of Borrisnostry and Greycullen. Will you provide the funding for that? And will you expand and increase the number of GPs per county? There's a commitment in the programme for government in relation to expanding and exploring the number. It says explore the recruitment of HSE employed GPs. We need to go further than explore it. We need to do it. Explore. It says explore the recruitment of HSE employed GPs. We need to start employing a cohort of those also. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, there are 179 primary care centres now in place, as I said, 179, and 50 of those since 2000 have opened since 2020. And I take your point. I mean, we do still need more GPs. So the outgoing Minister for Health, Stephen Donnelly, had approved with the outgoing Minister for Higher Education, now Taoiseach, additional places in all third-level colleges in respect of medicine, and also in terms of nursing and so on in Northern Ireland. But in terms of the specifics, we have programmes also for rural, to attract people into rural Ireland and to provide greater cover in rural Ireland in terms of rural GP programmes. And we fully accept the challenges that are out there, and I will inquire in respect of Rathdowney and other locations within County Laois, and also critically the status of the Portlaoise project. But we are committed to primary care, and we'll continue to expand primary care.
Thank you, Taoiseach, and that concludes Leaders' Questions. Now we move in accordance with Standing Order